Hi, welcome to Another Accent, the program where you can meet people from faraway places who have made Barbados their home. My name is Gabriela Moenig, and our guest today, another lady, of course from a faraway place, who has a special treat for us. Her name is Susan McIntosh, and she offered to sing for us in another accent.
Welcome to Another Accent. We hope you'll enjoy the show.
Great, fantastic, man. I wish we had an audience to applaud to that, man. Really good. Well, Susan, this isn't the kind of singing you just decide to do on the spot. You have to be trained to sing like that. And you were, in fact, trained as an opera singer.
That's right. It takes maybe between 5 and 10 years to train in opera. And I trained at Otago University in New Zealand and with the English National Opera in London.
Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't opera singers usually a bit more voluptuous?
Yes, they are actually, it's probably more to do with the strength of your abdominal muscles and of your diaphragm, because your sound comes, it comes from down here. But actually, normally, yeah, opera singers are larger than me.
But what convinced you, or where did you get the courage to pursue it anyhow?
Well, gosh, I had a lot of encouragement from home, and I did a lot of shows, and people really enjoyed the work that I was doing, so I just carried on.
Susan, you were trained as an opera singer, but you're not limited to opera singing. You have sung in musicals and also with rock and jazz bands, so really all across the board, right?
That's right. I sang in maybe 30 or so operas and musicals with the New Zealand Opera Company and various other companies.
Give us a few examples.
I sang in Evita, West Side Story, Cats. In the opera arena, I would have done, Madame Butterfly, Marriage of Figaro, Magic Flute.
Susan, could you give us a few examples of roles that you actually sang?
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
I did, for example, Hoddle in Fiddler on the Roof, and Jelly Lorum in Cats.
But as I said, you sang with rock bands and jazz bands as well, and you're still doing that today. Give us a couple of examples for that.
Well, when I was living in France and in Switzerland, I sang with a rock band called Fragile and a pop band called Les Horribles Sonettes, and we sang all around the European Music Festival circuit. I often find that if you go to a different country, there may not necessarily be the same arena for performing that you normally come to expect. So when I moved to France, there was no place for me to do shows or operas, so I moved into bands and played a lot more jazz and sung pop and rock.
And where can we see you sing here in Barbados?
And here in Barbados, man, I so love living here. I always think that it's best to find the positive in a place, and the great positive thing about Barbados music is the calypso, the soca, the National Cultural Foundation Crop Over Festival is fantastic. For example, I sing in a couple of calypso tents. I really enjoy calypso. So I'm not so much doing opera down here because there isn't so much of an arena for it.
I can't make my tea. I'm too afraid to speak. I can't make my tea. I'm too afraid to speak.
I wish in me energy and all my ability, but this shit just go, I rock you to and through.
It's really amazing, Susan. People here in Barbados can go to one calypso tent and hear you sing, and they can go to another calypso tent the very next night and actually see you play keyboard.
That's right. I'm playing keyboard for the all-female calypso tent this year, which is Calypso Dome. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. I really enjoy playing in a band, and it's really nice to play with a whole bunch of girls. We're having a great time.
Only a couple of weeks passed since we first visited you here and you've changed your appearance.
Yep, it's crop over time right now, and I find it's always fun if you're doing stage work to change your image a little bit. And I was a little bit sick of the blonde. It's quite hard to maintain.
You look great anyhow.
Thank you.
Susan, you were born and raised in New Zealand. I hope that became clear, and that's also where you received your initial musical training, which was really a classical one. So opera singing was one part, and the other was playing the violin. I understand from what you tell us that opera singing had to take the back seat a little bit, but playing the violin is still very much part of your life today, right?
That's right. There's not so much of a venue to sing opera here in Barbados, but I really enjoy playing the violin and mixing my music with people from different cultures and people with different musical genres. I studied classical music for about 20 years in New Zealand and played in orchestras for operas over there. And then when I went to Europe, I really enjoyed playing some jazz. I played with a punk rock group in Switzerland, which was really fun, and just mixing up my music with other people's music, which I really enjoy. One thing I find really difficult is coming from a classical music background where I'm used to having a sheet of music in front of me, and the whole idea of classical music is to play the thing as technically perfect as possible. And then to move from not only not having a sheet of music in front of me, but suddenly you can play anything that you want, because a lot of the work that I've been doing has been composing my own melodic lines and rhythm structures to go underneath what other people have been playing and singing. And so again, it's just so difficult not to have the sheet of music in front of me. I'm like, well, where do I put my eyes, for one thing? How can I think of things to play that are going to fit without already having composed something and written it down? All of these things were really difficult. And the other thing with the violin is that it's such a structured thing. It's so difficult to play that you are in such an awkward, difficult position all the time that you need to have this hand free to be playing all your lines, that the idea of dancing with maintaining this very rigid position is really difficult. And when I was playing with my Swiss group, I played in a punk rock group called Small Fry. We not only composed our own lines and didn't have music in front of us, but we also danced as well. And it was so difficult for me to first think, okay, well, I have to keep all of this really rigid, but then I can move everything else. And so just having that kind of training meant that I came here and suddenly I could like dance and play, which is really an unusual thing to be able to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Susan McIntosh.
You demonstrated that you can very well do that. You recently had 2 performances. You played with John King. You had an outstanding performance there. As I understand, you got a standing ovation for that. And then we also saw you earlier this year, at the Barbados Conga Line Festival on stage with legend Charles O'Dell. And I also understand that the same Charles O'Dell, legend, is one of the artists you're now recording in your own recording studio.
Yes, I have a small recording studio which I bought in Switzerland. I paid for it with, I was earning money through the United Nations. I had a job there and I paid for all my equipment. It was a really proud day when I finally got everything together that I needed to record and produce CDs. And I brought it with me when I moved to Barbados, and since then I've produced some artists, folk artists, Rastafari and African artists. It's been really fun. One of the people I've produced is Charles O'Dell, and that was really interesting, producing his music. I also compose and I produce some of my own music, trying to again mix up my kind of musical style with the music influences in Barbados. And actually last year I brought out a CD single called Wrap It Up, which was talking about how wonderful the West Indies are, how lovely the people are, how much I'm enjoying living here. And really it's actually about a girl who wants a West Indian man for Christmas, and she's talking about all the positive, the lovely traits of the people who live here.
Susan, as you just mentioned, you write your own music as well, and you record your own music. In fact, you have a CD out called Wrap It Up, and the video of it was actually nominated for the prestigious CBU Music Video Award.
I actually compose in a lot of different styles. As I said, I'm classically trained, so it's very easy for me to compose a classic line. I've also been training in England and Switzerland in jazz, and I'm very interested in mixing up jazz and classical music with the indigenous music of the place where I'm living. And in Barbados, the music here is so interesting and diverse and very challenging for me. It's a very different music to anything I'm accustomed to. The phrasing, for example, of calypso, where the beat lies in the drum pattern, is totally not where I would expect it to be, and where how people phrase their lyrics. Again, the impetus, the stress is on a different part of the word to how I would normally put it, and the phrasing is completely different in terms of where the stress is in the bar. So for me, it's a very interesting place to analyze the music that is coming out of here, and also to try and find my way in the midst of all of this wonderful rhythmic music.
If there was a name for your music, could you classify it? What would you call it?
People have tried to classify my music, and really it encompasses so many different genres of music. It's quite hard. It's a quite interesting brew. I am very strongly influenced by my Scottish heritage. There's a lot of Celtic influence in my music. And also because I've studied classical and jazz, those influences are coming in too. And plus, we're living in such an interesting, music environment here in Barbados, with all the rhythm, and really calypso and the indigenous rhythms from here are so interesting. I'm trying to mix that up as well.
Really Christmas time again. A year had passed, I worked so hard cause I was keeping my head down, but now I need a little welcome distraction. So I'm gonna write a letter to ask for Santa's help, cause it's Christmas, only one thing rings my bell. Santa, I'm only asking if you can please bring me this year a West Indian man with curly eyelashes, a beautiful face, and sunshine that dances when we embrace. I know when I see him I'll feel I've come home, and when I hold him he'll relax my bones. I've waited a long time for this, please can't you indulge me just this once? I'm asking you to wrap it up, wrap it up. I want a West Indian Christmas. Wrap it up, wrap it up. I want a West Indian Christmas. Wrap it up, wrap it up. I want a West Indian Christmas. Wrap it up, wrap it up. Cause the only thing I want this year is you. Now I want the kind of man that I see all around me as I go about the business of the day. He could be behind the wheel of that red car that passed me, or he could have been the body that just waved. Every day it's hard to resist. So this Christmas there's only one thing on my list. Santa, please say if I'm asking too much. Let him be sweet cause I'm tempted to touch. He's kind and he's caring, he's looking so fine. Maybe he'll even teach me to wine. Don't care if he's Trini or St. Lucian, that's ancient, antique and Grenadian. But if you made it so I had to choose, make him a Bayesian cause they like my food. Wrap it up, wrap it up. I want a West Indian Christmas. They like my wrap it up, wrap it up. I want a West Indian Christmas. They like my wrap it up, wrap it up. I want a West Indian Christmas. They like my wrap it up, wrap it up. Cause the only thing I want this year is you.
Susan, you are a woman with so many interests, hobbies and skills that one is almost tempted to ask, what don't you do? And maybe I should say Barbados can really be glad to have you here because you have so much to share. I would like to know what brought you here.
Actually, I came here with my husband. He's a Barbadian, and we met in Geneva in Switzerland. We were both working for different UN organisations, and he really needed to come back to Barbados for work. And I really jumped at the chance of moving to the West Indies. It's the Caribbean is really not a place that's on the map for New Zealanders and Australians. It's very difficult to get here. It's very expensive. It's actually cheaper for a New Zealander to fly to England than it is to fly to the West Indies, even though the West Indies is half the distance that it takes to get to England. And so because it's such an unusual part of the world, and I knew that it had a lot of African and Latin American influences in their music, I was dying to come because I was really very excited to learn about the culture and the people here.
And that's exactly what you did as well, right? From New Zealand, you went to Australia and then to Europe. Could you tell us a little bit what you did in Europe before you came to Barbados?
I first moved to London when I was 25. Actually, I kind of reversed what my mother did because she really wanted to come to New Zealand, and she emigrated from England when she was 25. And so I spent my whole childhood learning about my English heritage and my English relatives, and I really wanted to go back there and find out for myself what it was all about. And plus I was I really wanted to study opera and to ski in Europe because those at the time are my two great passions. So I actually moved to London to study opera when I was 25, and I worked with the English National Opera for a time and also at the BBC in television. And then I moved to France, a little bit of a long story. I went skiing out there, and I really wanted to move out there and stay. So I lived in a ski resort for a couple of years and ended up in Geneva, which was very close to the resort where I was living in, and got a job with the United Nations, which was where I met my husband.
Susan, your husband Ian, I understand, is not just your partner in life and travel and sport, but you actually ski together and you work together sometimes, and he films you while you are pursuing this other passion of yours, which is skiing.
Actually, Ian and I produce ski movies together, something which we really enjoy doing. When we first met in Geneva, I told him that I was very much into skiing and that he basically wouldn't see me for 6 months of the year if he didn't like it as well. And I actually thought the best thing for us to do would be to learn snowboarding together. And I'd been snowboarding for only a few days before in the previous season. So I taught him how to snowboard, and now he snowboards really well. It's something we can really enjoy together. Skiing's actually a really technical thing to do. It's very difficult to learn to do well. I learned from when I was very small, so it was actually really easy for me to do, but to actually teach somebody who hasn't been on snow before, it's not such a good idea. It's much quicker to learn how to snowboard. Ian's now a really good snowboarder. We can now film each other and film our group of people that we take to different resorts in the United States and in Europe and make ski movies. And one ski movie's now finished and the other one's being edited at the minute. Actually, Ian's quite a talented photographer. He took the photo that is behind us at the moment. It's of a ski resort called Prévent, which is in the Chamonix Valley. And this was a particularly lovely day. You can see that the clouds, we're actually above the cloud line. So down in the town of Chamonix, it's going to be dark and horrible and not a very nice day. And above the clouds, you're just in brilliant sunshine. It was really a lovely day that he took that photo.
Susan, you are so modest. You just said in passing, well, I used to ski for a couple of years, but I know you've really skied all your life. You're really good at it. You did slalom and all kinds of fancy stuff. So what have you found here in Barbados to replace that? It's obviously hard to go skiing here unless you water ski. So what sports did you find to replace that?
The nearest thing to skiing in Barbados I can find to do is roller skating, and I go roller skating quite a lot. I live quite close to the gymnasium, and there's a really nice car park that you can skate around. And actually the action of rollerblading is quite similar to skiing. You're exercising the same kind of muscles and you can build up the same kind of speed. So it's just really nice to go out and have the wind at my face and to really get in and enjoy roller skating.
Oh yeah, roller skating, that reminds me. Virgin Atlantic had this big event at the boatyard a few months ago, and I hear you almost risk your life there.
Hardly. I'm from New Zealand, which is a land of action adventure, and I've done a lot of extreme sports in my time. Rap jumping, which is abseiling off 20-story building, but actually facing downwards so that you're jumping, and oh, it's really a wonderful sensation. And so when I heard about this Virgin Birdman contest in Barbados, I really wanted to give it a go. It actually wasn't very frightening. They made a pier that was 33 feet high, which was quite high actually. And I went off on my roller skates, and unfortunately, just before I went to go off the pier, it started raining and they stopped the contest. And then straight afterwards, of course, the pier was soaking wet and it made it really, really slippery, so I couldn't get any purchase for pushing off on my roller skates to get any speed to get some decent distance. And so it was really quite slippery, but it was fun as well.
And you had quite an unusual outfit on as well, right?
Yes, I went off on my wedding dress and I had this huge blonde wig and my snowboarding helmet, and actually I was the only person to dive off the pier. Everybody else kind of went timidly off and kind of jumped into the water, but I wanted to dive, so it was actually really good fun, good laugh.
Amazing. Well, Susan, I imagine people are not going to believe me when I tell them that after all the many things we have heard and see you do, we haven't even touched on your professional work yet. You did mention that you worked for BBC in London for a couple of years, and that's exactly what you do here in Barbados as well now. You operate a camera and you also edit.
I work for Creative Junction. They're an audiovisual production house, and we make television programs and advertisements for CBC. I really love my job. I do a lot of filming and editing. Quite often when we film, we go out to some really interesting events. We've filmed a lot of crop-over events, a lot of really large stages, concerts. I'm quite often on centre camera, so I'm on a huge big platform that's completely surrounded by people, and I have to follow the people on stage, which is really fun and really a technical challenge, because quite often people on stage will be walking in and out of the light, and you have to keep changing exposure. If they're walking forward and backward, you're constantly changing focus on them. And yeah, I really enjoy my job. I also do a lot of editing. I quite often end up working nights because I have a rush job on. For example, I need to get an hour's edit to CBC, and I really have to work overnight to get it finished. So it's quite demanding. There's a lot of hours involved, but the work is really very interesting, and I get to go out to a lot of events that I would actually really like to go and see anyway, but that I get paid to go and film, which is really fun.
And where did you learn how to do all of that?
I used to work in the BBC in London, in television. I worked for 2 television arts programs, and I got a lot of really useful training. The BBC is quite an extraordinary place. Everybody is so much more skilled for their job than their job allows. And so because everybody's so overskilled, the quality of the product is just so wonderful. It's a really very high quality product that they put out. I've got a lot of respect for the people who work there.
I don't know about London, but here in Barbados there certainly aren't very many women doing what you do.
No. Yeah, actually I worry about my job. Sometimes I'm constantly in trousers and it's just not a very feminine thing to do. I'm always with the lads and I always have to be lifting huge amounts of gear and gear that weighs a lot as well. It's kind of a guy job.
So what are you planning to do next? What's next for Susan McIntosh?
Well, actually now crop over is coming to an end. I really need a rest. I wouldn't mind taking a little bit of time off. We're thinking about having children. I'd really like to have children right now. And again, more ski movies, more filming for television, which I love. I'd really like to start composing a bit more into the calypso genre. I'm just not sure where my place is with that, so I kind of need to work that one out. But yeah, just to keep improving and keep doing the same producing.
Join us for a repeat of this program Tuesday after next at 8:30 a.m. and for another episode of Another Accent in 2 weeks from today.